Right, we're live here on Monday, 27th April. Live stream here on Chatcam. I can see some good stuff coming in. We've got Florian, Shafiq, Joaquin. So again, love if you guys would put, where are you, city and country, and the emotional connect. One word that captures how you are as we begin this session here today. And really good to get back onto live stream. So we've got a couple of things here. I've got my notebook full of ideas. Alba, sound. Sound is poor. Sebastian Rice from Austria. Alba, good to see you. I hope the sound's a bit better when we're running through here. So let's go to our cam here, and I'm going to start with a question that my notes here in this book are from 3 webinars that I attended over the last week. One was by an EO member who lives in Barcelona called David Schnurman, and he had a question, and I'd like to share this question with all of you. Where do you want to be more fearless in your life? And David asked this question. He asked us to just take a couple of minutes and in our book note down a couple of areas in your life where you'd like to be more fearless. And I like the way he phrased it, not more courageous, but where would you like to have less fear? And I'd love if in the chat some of you just stick, as you think about this question, what areas of your life, relationships, work, making money, striving for ambitious goals, travel, achieving great things, where do you feel that fear is holding you back the most? And as we have this time that another friend of mine, Mario Alonso Puig, last week, he said, this isn't quarantine. If you call it quarantine, it's already giving yourself a negative interpretation of this time. He said he calls it a retreat. If anyone says, Mario, how are you dealing with the quarantine? He says, no, it's a retreat. How am I handling my retreat? Really good. I'm really making use of this retreat. And he says interpretation. The way you interpret events has such an impact on us as human beings. Mario Alonso Puig is a doctor and has spent his whole life looking at the expression of genes, so how our genetics result in how we live. And attitude, the attitude you take towards the world, really changes how your genes are expressed in the development of proteins and how the final version turns out. And that if you are a victim, if you feel a victim, there is nothing to be gained. There is no resourcefulness from the state of victim. If you can change your attitude towards things, and sometimes it's just relabeling. Instead of calling this quarantine, to call it a retreat. And to tell yourself you're on retreat. Others might call it quarantine. Others might talk about quarantine. But to you, you'll interpret this as a retreat. And by interpreting it as a retreat and thinking about it, it's time to look at yourself, to get to know who yourself. And this question, where do you want to be more fearless in your life? So let's head out to our chat cam here and see what we're getting. So I've just finished my exercise routine and had a shower, so still getting the sweat out. Hey, San Francisco, Stephen from San Francisco. It must be quite early there in California. Ash from Iran, Shivam from New Delhi, Gabrielle, Malaysia, Charlie from Munich, exhausted. Yeah, it's hey, Inglesi and Pilole, good to have you on the call. Call it a long weekend. Exactly. I've often thought that here in Spain, the country shuts down in August. And before I moved to Spain, I couldn't believe that it could be possible for a country to just stop. And the first year that I lived in Spain, I thought, well, I'm not going to take all of August off. The whole country's closed. All the shops are closed. There's very little services on the street. So to think of this as just one long August for Spain But call it a long weekend, call it a retreat, but just be very careful with the labels that you give things, because once you label something and it has a negative or a positive connotation to you, it's going to shape your interpretation of the event. Christian, what's your workout routine? There's a UK YouTube phenomenon called Joe, PE with Joe, and he just started appearing on my YouTube stream, and every day I try and find a 15, 20, 25 minute HIIT, HIIT, high intensity interval training routine that you can do at home with no weights. On my blog, probably about 4 weeks ago, I shared one of the routines that I've been doing quite often, which is a 15-minute, 5 exercises, and you just end up exhausted, but it works out the whole body. So there's a link on the blog to that. So on this question of where do you want to be more fearless, let's see some answers. Steve McNulty, great to see you. We can't always choose the music life plays for us, but we can choose how we dance to it. And I've seen it, I guess, for those that have weddings being affected by this current virus-affected travel ban, virus-affected stay at home. I wonder, I'm feeling very lucky that I don't have major family events that are being affected at this time, but I do feel a lot for those who have birthdays and events that they're having to cancel at this time. So let's go over, and I'm going to share some of the stories that I've put together here. Mario Alonso Puig. There was a beautiful story that Mario Alonso shared as part of his talk, and he said that story from a little village down in Andalusia, and in this village there was no rain for weeks and weeks, and after weeks and weeks of no rain, the crops were starting to wither in the fields, and the people were starting to worry. And the priest said to the people, "Don't worry, I'm going to pray for rain." And he said, "Tomorrow, come out to me to the plains, to the flat areas around the town, and I will pray for rain." And the next day, the whole village population headed out to the fields. One individual carried an umbrella out to the field. Now that person believes. The rest want to believe. They're willing to go out there, but they don't really believe. And one of the reflections that I've been really looking at the areas where I'm fearful in my life, the areas where I feel it's me self-sabotaging my own progress in life. To what degree am I like one of the villagers that heads out to the field in hope, but without the umbrella, versus that villager that heads out to the fields carrying an umbrella because he truly believes that it's going to rain? And I think that our lives have a way that when you go into any adventure, go on any journey, and you want to believe, you're heading out to the plains, but you're not carrying the umbrella, you're going to cheat yourself. You're going to let yourself down. You're not going to put everything in. You're going to give yourself excuses. You're going to let yourself off the hook. It's only where you really believe, that you do the work inside yourself to connect to why you want this and why you're going to stick it out till it's done, that it's really going to make a difference. And in fact, I'll share with you the areas that I wrote down where to be more fearless in my life, which I took some time to think about these questions, because I think it's very easy in this quarantine time, or this retreat time, or whatever you wish to call it. Certainly in my life, it's very easy that my life fills up with Zoom calls and live streams and phone calls, and day after day of this retreat goes by, but I'm not actually on retreat. I'm keeping myself busy. So I do make an effort with my notebook in the morning, the afternoon, the evening, to really stop and think about how I allow this period to be something that allows change to happen in my life. That I allow it to be a period where I do the work to let go of some of the past chapters, to close the chapters that needed to finish but I was keeping open, and to begin some new chapters. And sometimes closing a chapter, letting something go, not finishing something but saying it's done, I'm not giving any more of my life to it, is very difficult, because you've got to accept that you failed. You've got to accept that you didn't achieve something that you set out to. Here's the 4 things that I wrote down. Get on bigger stages, ask for help, creating a beautiful home, income generation. These are 4 areas where I feel that the way I live my life is more fearful than fearless. And I'm not altogether clear what holds me back from these things, but bigger stages. And I was taking some time over this break to look at what are the speeches that I really have enjoyed giving, which are the groups I've really enjoyed working with and I want to do more of. And which are some of the trainings, the events, the things I'm involved in that aren't so rewarding. And I think I really love it when I work with really committed people. And bigger stages where I work with people that really are committed, the ones that are carrying those umbrellas. But something holds me back from getting onto big stages. There's a little voice inside my head that kind of says later, when you're older, when you know more, when you're more practiced. And I don't know to what I owe this little voice that tells me that I'm not good enough, I haven't done the work, there's more to read. Certainly my friend Florian is a great inspirer to say, Conor, once you've read 3 books, you've read enough, then get out there and help others, make it work in the lives of others. But I tend to be someone who tends to read 3-4 books and then read more and more and more and never get down to just believing I know enough to go for it. So get onto big stages. Another one, ask for help. And I don't ask for help, not on the important things. I ask for help in the controlled things, in the things where it's not really going to be too painful if the other person lets me down. A friend of mine, Tony Anagor, has prompted me to have quite a few conversations with him about this approach of how much I really do ask for help. Not in a way that you owe it to me, not in a way that I need it, please help me, but do I give others the opportunity to know that they could help me? And I don't ask for help enough. And I don't ask for help in a meaningful way to the people that I think would find it very valuable to be asked for help. And I wonder whether you ask for help. And sometimes it's a lot easier to help another than to really open up to be helped by someone else. I certainly find it's a lot easier for me to give feedback over someone else's speech than to stop and allow someone to help me improve my speech. In fact, over a couple of weeks ago, I had a webinar that I was giving for IESE Business School. And for 3 weeks before the webinar, I was thinking, I've got to do it, it's going to be a big stage, I've got to do it better than I would, I've got to do it different than I would. I put together a PowerPoint. And I never give PowerPoint presentation, but something pushed me to feel that I needed to do it in the way that someone else would do it, a Jim Collins or Tom Peters or some guru, not the way I'd do it. And my style is I just tell stories, but I somehow talked myself in that this wasn't a stage for just me being myself and telling stories. I talked myself into I have to be the type of leadership guru that you see on television. And the morning of that event, it was at 4 o'clock on a Monday a few weeks ago, I actually had asked my father to give me some advice, listen in. We got on the FaceTime and I said to him, the most helpful thing would be is if I just give it as if it was the real webinar and you and me work through how we can improve it. And it was terrible. It was a mess. I've gone 15 years that I haven't really used PowerPoint when I teach, when I tell stories. So the PowerPoint had trapped me into a style of speaking that I wasn't used to. I was trying to look the part, and it was terrible. And I went through the full motions for the full content that I have, voice in my head thinking, this is terrible. And I knew it, and I was doing it to the single person that I most want to tell me that I'm good enough, that he's proud of me. And I let him help me. And at the end, when it finished, I wanted to say that was terrible, but I let him tell me. And the funny thing was, it was so bad that when he finished, I think he was looking for some positives to say. And sometimes the more painful thing isn't when someone says that you're bad, it's when you can see them searching to find anything positive that they can say to just let you know that it wasn't terrible, but it was terrible. And at the end I said, Dad, I am so glad that there was an audience of just one person for that. I am sorry that you had to sit through this. And I said, but I know this afternoon when I do it, and there was 1,500 people when I actually did it, and thank God there was no PowerPoint. It was Conor being Conor, just telling stories. I told the 20-mile march story that I've shared in this live stream. I shared the 19, I don't know what else I shared, but it was just 2 or 3 stories. And for me, remembering that it's just a human being speaking to a human being, that there's billions of us stuck in quarantine, or if you label it well, on personal and family retreats. And I don't have any wise words to share. All I have is a bit of encouragement to say, look, it's tough. But we're all in this together, and there's people out there that need to hear from you. And I don't know whether it was better or worse, but it's certainly my style. And this constant battle between who I think I should be as a leadership guru, a professor in a business school, versus what comes from me, which is just to be encouraging, just to let people know when they do something well, and challenge them when they're not being the best that they can be. I often find, I think, like, what the hell do I actually know? The only thing I really do is look into people and say, do more of what you're good at and stop doing the crap that hurts you. And if you just keep repeating that to someone, they get better and better and better, and then they think that you helped them in some way. I guess probably my superpower is with any person, I see their potential. If I meet you, if I'm in a room with you, I see what you're fully capable of. And I guess this power I have with students, whether they're young or old, is looking into them and seeing the incredible potential that they have, that if they choose to do a little bit of work, the difference that it would make to how they come across in the world. And that has such an impact, and hopefully through video there's some element of that interaction that I have face-to-face in a classroom, in a corporate event, on a stage in a big leadership event. Deep down I just know that every human is capable of so much, and so often the limit to ourselves is fear, is for me these 4 things that for some way, some reason, some big handbrake is on in my life in just slowing down the achievement of these things. So English, and let's go back to our chat, see a few chats coming in here. And so I have my wife coming in to tell me the sound is bad, and I don't know which buttons to push to deal with that. Let's see if we can do a little adjustment on our sound levels here, and maybe that improves the sound. So those of you on chat, somehow the audio settings were pushed way up and have been blurring out. So if in the chat has the sound improved since I've made these adjustments in sound. So Florian, thank you for that. Stop doing start doing what you're good at and stop doing the crap you're doing now. Yes. Amar Hassan, family retreat. I think labeling this time well, and Mario Alonso Puig just gave to all of the Vistage members here in Spain this real sense that our power in how we interpret what is happening, how we label what is happening to us has such an impact on how we come across and how it impacts in terms of turning us into resourceful, creative, flowing human beings, or stuck, small, fearful human beings. Good. Oh, can barely hear you now. Right, let's see what's happening on our sounds. So I'll clearly have to work out sound. I've switched over from OBS to Streamlabs for the live streaming, and clearly there's some work to be done on improving sound. So let's go back here, and what I wanted to go through was Mario Alonso Puig. And what Mario Alonso Puig shared also with us was the 5 stages of grief. And what he talked about is you need, in any territory, if you're in a place and you don't have a map, you're going to have a lot of anxiety. So one of the most important things you can give to another person is a map. Because once a human being has a map, even if they don't know the territory, if they've got a map and the map is any good, it's going to give you a lot more sense of control over your destination. Mario Alonso was saying, in times of uncertainty, one of the maps that can help you understand the terrain you're in is the 5 stages of grief. And the 5 stages of grief that you move through when any change happens, when any blow hits your life. The 5 stages: number 1, shock; number 2, denial; number 3, anger; number 4, fear and sadness; and number 5, acceptance. Shock is, when something hits you, the first thing is just an almost animal reaction. Once you've overcome shock, denial. You push it away. It's only going to be a little thing. It's not going to change anything. Denial. Push it away. Refusal to see the facts. Refusal to look at things that are going to tell you that I'm going to have to cancel plans. I'm going to have to let go some of the ideas I had. So denial. And when your process of denial doesn't work anymore and the facts are telling you that things are going to change, then you move to anger. And anger is pushing outward, that it's not your fault, it's someone else's fault, that it's something cruel being done to you. And we can spend a lot of time in anger, because anger is a very intense and almost rewarding state to be in. You feel powerful when you're in anger. But in anger, it's someone else's fault, it's cruelty happening to you, it's unfair, it's unjust, and you feel strong, you feel powerful, but you're blocking that the change is able to happen. Then 4, fear and sadness. And I guess the sadness is a realization you're going to have to let go of some things that you really enjoyed in the past. Let go of some parts of you that have got you to here, but they're not going to take you any further. Let go of some people, let go of some projects that have got you here, but are not taking you further. Or let go of some things that you had visioned for yourself in the future. And in my own personal case, I think the hardest thing for me is to let go of a future that I've already visualized for myself, but the time, what's happening is forcing that plan is going to have to change, either further away in the future or it's just not going to happen. And for me, letting go of things I've already visualized for myself in the future can often be harder than letting go of projects that I started in the past, but they're not going to finish. And when you can get through fear and sadness, you move to stage 5, which is acceptance. Now, these 5 stages, he asked us, where are we at, in the current coronavirus on dealing with what's happening? What of those 5 stages we're on? And what I'd love in the chat is if you just let us know of the 5 stages in terms of how coronavirus, the COVID-19 illness, the way politicians and governments and health organizations are responding with lockdowns, with limited movement, limited travel. Which of the 5 stages are you in? Shock, denial, anger, fear, sadness, or acceptance? And I'd love if you just put the word in, because the next part he said is, if you think you are in acceptance but you're judging another person, if you think, and when I answered the question, I thought, I'm in acceptance, I've accepted what it means. But he said, if you're judging anyone else for their denial, if you're judging anyone else for their anger, if you're judging anyone else for their fear or their sadness, it's that you're not in acceptance. And you think you've accepted here, but you haven't fully accepted and let go of the past. And your transference onto others is that you are not in acceptance. You think you're in acceptance, but there's still a part of you holding on to something that you had. And the way it's being expressed is by allowing yourself to judge others and feel that someone, what he says, the 5 stages are not good humans are at acceptance and bad humans are at shock and denial. They are human experiences of dealing with change. And to say that you never go through shock, denial, or anger is a lie. As a human being, these 5 things are part of the human experience. It is not a bad thing to be in shock. It's not a bad thing to be in denial. It's not a bad thing to be in anger. It's not a bad thing to be sadness or fear. It's a bad thing to get stuck there. But it's part of the human experience to move through these 5 phases at the speed with which you are able to move through it. And someone who is truly at acceptance is able to have compassion for someone who's in shock. Is able to have compassion for someone who's in denial. Is able to have compassion and understanding for someone who's angry. Is able to have compassion and empathy and understanding for someone who's sad or in fear. And that to be truly accepting of a major change is to be a source of positive encouragement for people along the way, of understanding, of letting them know that there's nothing wrong with feeling sad. There's nothing wrong with being angry. What is wrong is staying there, not letting the natural process of moving through the phases. And the most dangerous one to get stuck in is anger. The most dangerous stage to get stuck in, because you can get stuck in it for years. And back in 2008, 2009, when my business went bankrupt, shock probably was 6 weeks. Denial was a couple of weeks, and then anger. Anger filled pretty much a whole year of my life when my business went bankrupt back in 2008. And it didn't fill a year of my life because other people did anything to me. It filled a year of my life because I kept telling myself things and kept interpreting things that allowed me to feel this righteous anger. And you feel very alive when you can blame someone, when you can feel the victim, when you can feel hard done by. And for most of 2009, that was the state I was in, anger. And then towards the end of 2009, I went through fear and sadness. And for me, one of the breakthrough moments was a course called Breakthrough Experience with Dr. John Demartini. And I'd love to say that that's what shifted me to acceptance. I think it probably took me another 3 years to really get to the stage where I had fully accepted that in 2008, that idea that I was going to be a huge entrepreneurial success, have a wonderful life that people looked up and thought, wow, what a great person, what a great leader, what a great entrepreneur. I had to let go. That wasn't going to happen. And that bit by bit, the fear and sadness of letting go of all the success I had visualized for myself, letting go of all the decisions I'd taken in the past to sacrifice now for the future, I had to let go of. It took me a long time to let go of all of that. And probably 2, 3, 4 years to move through to a state of full acceptance. And today, I feel grateful for the bankruptcy of my business, TaxiJet, back in 2008. I feel that most of the great people, most of the great projects, most of the great things that have come into my life came in because that crisis just closed down a set of things that over a couple of years I managed to put into the past and create a new way of being. And the way I teach, which now is very much Conor being Conor, telling stories, and a view that there's only 2 things I want to get across in a class. Number 1, self-belief. Give to you the sense that if you do the work, it's going to really have an impact. And second, self-confidence, that you can do this. If you put the right type of practice in, you'll get that reward. And if I can give people those 2 things, self-belief that it matters, self-confidence that you are capable, not others, but you are capable. If you do the work, you will have an impact on how well you do things. If I can get those two things across, that's all that a teacher needs to do. And I often forget this. And that story of the IESE webinar that I was giving early April, I went back through that classic pattern of trying to be better or trying to be bigger or trying to be more impressive in an image I have of what a good teacher would do. And it took asking my father for help. And to be honest, I bet the reason I asked him for help is I wanted to impress him with how good my leadership guru stuff was going to be. So even my reason of asking for help was deeply flawed. But perhaps it doesn't matter what your reason for asking for help is if you really honestly allow the other person into your life to see who you are, to see what you're trying to achieve, and you listen to their words. And that there's a saying that sometimes we reject a golden letter because it's wrapped in a shitty envelope. And with feedback, so often the well-meaning good feedback of the other person is given to you in a clumsy way. And the clumsiness of the way they give it to you blinds you to the golden reward that is the core bit of feedback that's hidden behind their poor way of sharing it. And so many people have they have a little seed that will be marvelous for you, but their way of giving it to you is deeply flawed. One of the things that I've seen from the Toastmasters organization is Toastmasters, more than being a public speaking teaching organization or learning organization, it's an organization that inculcates into all the Toastmasters that I've come across in my life a real ability to ask for feedback and take it and enjoy it and really value the feedback for what it is, an opportunity to learn how you can be better, rather than what our natural human reaction is to take feedback as almost an insult to myself. The only way I'm going to get better is by listening to feedback today that hurts me. That, here the only reason I've known to deal with the sound is that Florian told my wife via WhatsApp, I assume. She came in, waved a big thing saying your sound is crap. The feedback helps. Let's go back to our chat cam here. So, Florian, yep. Stephen, my dad is 87, my mum is 85, stuck in the fear of getting the call that one of them has died. This thought comes up almost daily. It can create issues with living my life. Stephen, I'll go back to here because Stephen, my mum and dad live in Dublin. At the moment, I cannot physically travel to see them. My father is 75, my mum 74. They are healthy now, although 2 months ago, my father and my mother both had some small health challenges, nothing major. But I'd say about once every 10 days in this time that we've been in confinement, in this time that I haven't been able to travel to Dublin, I've woken at 3 a.m. with cold sweat, imagining that if anything happened, that if a phone call came from my mum or my dad just to say that one of them has been infected, that their lungs are struggling, and in some way I've kept it at bay, but there is a fear in me, and it does pop out as great fears tend to do at 2-3 in the morning when all the rest of the house is in darkness. And about every 10 days I do have a real fear, sadness, overwhelming. It seems to happen 2 to 3 to 4 in the morning. It's happened about every week to 10 days. And I worry about my parents. I worry about everyone who has parents. I worry about companies, how companies will get back going, rehire workers, how our economy will keep providing wealth so that we can pay for food, keep the things moving. And it all just hits me. And I can imagine if my parents were 10 years older, how tough it is. With my daughters, one of the things I learned as a parent is before I was a father, I don't think I would have ever wished that someone else's pain or illness could be mine. The first time I ever remember wishing that someone else's illness, that I could have it, that I could take it away and I could have it, was with my daughter Ali when she was 2 or 3 years old. And I remember on the sofa at home, she was sat next to me and you could hear her breathing. You could just hear this rasping pneumonia sound as she was breathing. And I remember sitting next to her thinking, I wish I could take that illness and have it myself. That I wish I had the power to take that pain out of her, that suffering out of her, and just bring it into me. And I've never felt that until I was a father. And nowadays, there's a lot of pain. And it's not that I want to take it, but I feel it. And I guess one of the changes for me pre-2008 was I never saw anyone else's pain or challenge or suffering. I just judged them. Since 2008, 2009, this way of opening up that everyone else is on their journey. Every one of us. There's a wonderful phrase that I use to myself sometimes in the morning, which is, every one of us is the body of an adult. Hidden inside is a 5-year-old child still trying to come to terms with life. And that's what every one of us is. Every one of you inside, there's a 5-year-old child that is still wondering what life is, what's happening. And there's this adult exterior that is trying to pretend to the world that you have it all under control. And sometimes when I'm feeling really stressed, really nervous, really anxious before I'm about to start teaching a class, or when the speaker just before me has been brilliant and my mind is thinking, like, what am I doing? This was so good. How do I follow that? I just remind myself, every single one of us is a 5-year-old child with this persona, with this armor around us that looks like an adult. And if I can just remember to speak to the 5-year-old child inside each of us and teach at a level that a 5-year-old child can get, then I'm connecting to the best part of you. So Stephen, I have no words to tell you how to handle it. I do. One of the things that stopped me, and I'm very grateful for, is right now my parents are old, but they're not old enough to have serious health issues. And I've been very grateful many days. And Stephen, I feel for you in the situation that you're in. And cross fingers that the travel can loosen up, that you'll be able to go and spend some time with them. But one of the things that I have done every 2 to 3 years, I sit down and I write a letter. And about every 2-3 years I've written a letter to my father in which I write down all that I need to share with him. And it's probably been 18 months since the last letter that I gave over. So probably one of the things I might take time next week to do is to write a letter again to the people that really are important in my life. And in that letter I try and put down everything that I need to say to you. And each time I've written these letters, I've written to my daughters, to my wife, to my parents. Each time I've written one of these letters, it's often on a retreat. I run a lot of retreats for executives. And one of the things that I will do when I give them this work is I'll go and write another letter. So I have many letters written to my daughters. I've written several letters to my parents. And what I try and do in that letter is imagine if this was the last communication I had to get everything I have left to say, every bit of gratitude, every memory, everything that I need to tell you off me and have it said, so that if I have communicated this, I know there's nothing left that I need to communicate. And if you weren't around tomorrow, I can feel that I've shared with you all that I needed to get across. And I know that exercise for me has been very powerful in freeing me up from that painful anxiety of, I went for years where every time I saw my mum calling me, there was this little initial thing, if something happened. and I couldn't do anything to stop them. My first reaction on seeing the phone showing my mum calling was, something's happened to my dad. And this went on for years. And in my case, I think being totally open and honest and vulnerable in a letter to him, to her, to my wife, to my daughters, is something that has really helped me become more accepting and at peace with the realities of life. And the realities of life is that we're born, we come into this life, we are here for a time, and then we leave this current form of life. And I think there's a quote, I don't know if it's Aristotle, that we don't worry when a child is afraid of the dark. We should worry when an adult man is afraid of the light. And to be afraid of the light, I think sometimes we hold back from really letting the people close to us know how important they are. I certainly, for many years, held off writing in a letter everything that I needed to say to my father. And my feeling was, once I've said everything, what do you say next? Can I just wait till the end and as a last moment share everything I need to say? And in that period, 2008, 2009, 2010, I went through quite a inner journey, and part of that was making sure all of the relationships around me, I was at peace with them. I had shared everything I needed to share, and there was nothing left unsaid. So to me, Stephen, something that has been of huge help to me is writing in a letter and sending that letter all that I need to let you know about the role that you've played in me being who I am, all that I'm grateful for, all that I thank you for, all that I remember of our time together. And these letters can be short or long, but they've certainly helped me create a freedom from some level of anxiety around the relationships. So let's switch back onto chat cam. So Stephen, do I actually send the letter? Now, this is a difficult one. And so I have written probably 20 of these letters. In my cupboard here, there are 6 letters written to my eldest daughter, and I told myself I will give them to her when she's 18. There's 2 letters written to my youngest daughter, and I've told myself I will give them to her when she turns 18. And actually those letters, I wrote them thinking that I'm not going to give you today, I'm going to give it to you on the day of your 18th birthday. And the way the letter is written is from me now, seeing you now, living my life now, imagining who you will be when you open this letter. When I do this as an exercise on a retreat with the groups that I'm with, the way I get them to think through the letter is imagine that you're going to give this to a loved one in 10 years' time. You're writing a letter now expressing who and how you hope this person is, how your lives have been together. And there's a very clear moment that you visualize 10 years or more in the future where they're going to open it. Now, most of the time, that frees you up to really write a deep letter. Then people go back home and then they give it to the person. And if you've written this letter from real honesty and real acceptance of how important this person has been and just wanting to say what you need to say, I've seen it transform marriages, I've seen transform parent-child relationships. So, Stephen, I think the most important part of the letter is the work it does to you internally to put onto a page what you need to say. But just imagine how meaningful it would be if you received such a letter from your child. Rui Martin's ideas of letters is good, but unfortunately with your parents, it's too late. And I would say, Rui, you have 3 adult sons. I don't know what ages they are. For me, doing this with your children, I let my wife read some of these letters, and when she has read some of the letters that I wrote to my daughters to be opened, still a few years in the future, she's like, where do you keep these? How do we make sure you do not lose these? These are worth more than anything. And I think, Rui, to your adult kids, anyone, there's still time. And I think even if someone is not alive, the act of really writing it and putting onto a page the feelings, the words, the things you need to say, I think is a very powerful way of just working through the stuff that is inside you. And whether you decide to give it or don't give it, I don't think is as important as the impact it has in you in getting clear how important this person was in shaping who and how you are today. So we're coming to the last few minutes here. I would like to thank you, all of you, for giving me these environments where I get to kind of explore ideas, think through what's going on in my life, put some sense into the webinars, the books, the things that I've been reading. I find that I learn by talking. And at the current moment, I'm not given the gift of 3-4 times a week going up the hill to IESE Business School and having 70 people listening to me. So thank you to each of you for giving me in some way an audience to speak to, because I learn more by speaking to you, by thinking about how to get my ideas into a way that get across to you than in any other way. So as we come to the end here, hey, Tony, good to see you on here. Tony, I've mentioned you a few times in these calls. Marcelo, Brazil, how can I coach my team from a distance? I think the same way you coach them up close, ask questions. And for me, the 5 questions: what do you really want to be and why? 2, what are you doing that's getting you there? 2, what are you not doing, or what are you doing poorly that's not helping you get there? 4, what resources are there? Who have you spoken to? 5, what do you need from me? Those are the questions that help you coach, whether it's face-to-face or at a distance. For me, Dan Sullivan, I love Dan Sullivan's podcast. If you're not a follower of Dan Sullivan, look up his podcast now. I love every single episode, how he thinks about life. Dan Sullivan, so Marcelo, for you, Dan Sullivan, the most powerful question I took from him in terms of coaching my team is a question he asks, which is, 3 years from today, what needs to change for you to be personally and professionally fulfilled? And you'll need to ask people 3, 4, 5, 6 times this question until they really realize that you're serious about it. And you're not looking for them to tell you the answer that they think you want. You're really interested in what would make them personally and professionally fulfilled. The first few answers they're going to try and give you is what would impress my boss. But you got to keep going to get down to what moves them. What needs to change in their life and in their professional life in the next 3 years for them to be professionally and personally fulfilled. And I find so often ingredients there that our company already has challenges that we can help you fill in some of the things that need to change in the next 3 years for you to be personally and professionally fulfilled. Mozambique, Mohammed, you're welcome. Sharing my thoughts is how I learn. Inglese and Pelole, thank you. Florian, thank you for being here. Thank you for being my source of inspiration. I think even if I don't call you, just the thought of how would Florian approach things inspires me to be more courageous, to do a more risky step than I would do without knowing that Florian is around encouraging, thinking, and always bringing positivity into my life. So I've got the last few minutes on here. I'm gonna do some testing on audio before we run our next live stream. But as we come up to the end here, and I see we've got 63 here. Thank you for sharing some time on this Monday afternoon. I'd love just one word in the chat. What word captures your state of mind, your state of being just at this moment? So stick that word in the chat. I'll read a few of those words and we'll finish it off here. And so this is just thank you for following the live streams. Thank you for being part of this. Thank you for helping me think. Because I think one of the things I've realized is the way that I think best is when I know there's other conscious minds listening to my words. And this YouTube live stream, for me, I probably learn more in preparing and delivering this than in all the other 167 hours of the week that I'm just floating around thinking. But this time forces me to think about how to share the words. There's a saying that I heard when I was young from my father: those that can, do; those that can't, teach. And I came across a quote today that turns it around. And it says, let me actually read it here because I wrote it down. So, Aristotle: those that know, do; those that understand, teach. And I'm 47 years old. I've carried around with me the quote, those that can do, those that can't teach, for 47 years. I'm going to replace it with those that can do, those that understand, teach. And I was looking through Aristotle, Plato, Socrates quotes this morning as I was just reflecting about life. And that idea that the teaching, that if you have a child, I have 2 daughters, and they're in my care. But as a teacher, I don't just have 2 children. I can give, and the work of really understanding something to the degree that I can share it in a way that it helps another person is a really powerful thing. Now, my wife has been laughing with me with this week because I talked about 2 types of enlightenment. And the Buddhists view that there's 2 types of enlightenment. There's the Pratyeka Buddha and the Bodhisattva. The Pratyeka Buddha is the little Buddha. This is to achieve enlightenment, to achieve some level of wisdom, but you've never developed an art or a skill that allows you to even tangentially share the idea with anybody else. And it can drive you mad. It can drive you mad to have seen something that you know to be true, but to be deeply lacking in any art, whether it's painting, drawing, poetry, singing, that can allow you to share this moment of realization with the world in a way that they don't look at you as if you're crazy. And I remember Alan Watts, the way he explains this type of Pratyeka Buddha would be someone who has taken LSD, the drug, or ecstasy, and while they're high on ecstasy, they look, and the ashtray in front of them at the table, in their heightened state, they realize that the ashtray looks like the face of God. And when they come back down from their ecstasy trip, they hold this ashtray and they show it to people and say, look, the face of God. And people think they're mad, and they go mad because they haven't developed a skill to be able to convey to people what they saw. The Bodhisattva is to have that moment of realization, but to have developed an art or a skill, whether it's painting, drawing, music, speaking, poetry, an art that allows you to convey to another human being the depth of the experience, such that they don't have your experience, but they see that there's a path that they can follow to find that depth of enlightenment. And the Bodhisattva is enlightenment plus you've developed an art. And poetry, painting, drawing, these are all arts that allow the ideas that you cannot express in words to be shared to other human beings. So I hope you take this time on family retreat to develop your art, to develop your skills in conveying the things that are almost impossible to convey with words in some way to other people. And with that, we're going to draw this stage to a close. So let me just have a look at some of our chats. Being yourself, always be positive. Emmanuel, gratitude. Mohammed, inspiration. Chris Bors, let it be. Eli, execution. Joachim, grateful. Harshad, good to have you here, Harshad. Hope you're still writing. Need to move. Hannah, thank you. Emmanuel, productivity. Stephen, grateful. And Stephen, those letters that I wrote have really helped me move beyond the fear of losing people in my life. Sarah from Palestine, great to have you. Alba, thank you. Great Quaranstream, yep. So there's some questions also on here. I'm going to compile some of these questions so the next live stream we have some ideas to start to going on. Florian, meaning after all those drugs, they had to become great artists. Yep, sadly, the path to enlightenment can be many and varied, but if you haven't done the work to really master a skill on your journey towards enlightenment, it can drive you mad to not have the ability to convey it to another. And in fact, at the moment with my 4-year-old daughter, the book we are reading, Jonathan Livingston Seagull. And this book, this novel, Jonathan Livingston Seagull by Richard Bach, really gets to the core of this idea of what a true enlightened, in the case seagull, is pulled to go back and teach those that need to grow. But teach from a position in the same way Mario Alonso Puig, the stages of grief, not from an attitude of feeling that he is better, but just with a compassionate feeling they are just on their journey, they're on their point on their journey. I'm not better than you because I'm higher up the mountain. I'm just happen to be on my journey, you're on your journey. And to have that compassion in life, and for me to remember every one of us is a 5-year-old trapped inside the body of an adult. If I can keep remembering that, then I treat the world well. Inglese, glad you like the book. Jonathan Livingston Seagull. I might put it onto my list of recommended books. With that, 5 o'clock. Thank you all. Been a real pleasure to share this time with you. We're going to declare this live stream an end. So 3, 2, 1. Pleasure to be with you. Have a good one.